is basically the way in which we all need to be operating.
We just hit record. So
Great.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't that.
No idea what I just said. Once I say it, it's gone.
So I'm Timothy Bard Levins. I'm a product design manager at Facebook, and I'm based out of Seattle, Washington.
I'm Liz Ogbu. I'm founder and principal of Studio O, a design studio that works at the intersection of racial and spatial injustice, and I'm based in Oakland, California.
Okay, so I'm Jennifer Rittner. I am she/her. I'm faculty at School of Visual Arts in Products of Design and Design Research, Writing, Criticism, and I run a small business called Content Matters, which is strategic communications for design.
I'm Alan Trochanov. I am the chair of the MFA Products of Design department at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I am based in New York City. I'm also a partner of Core77. And Jennifer wants to go back and say where she is.
Because I forgot where I am.
Well,
but does it really matter? I'm here. I'm inside of this box.
I mean, I think this is exactly why, like, if I look at most of the projects that like got multiple votes from us, it's like, in general, those were the projects that I would say, like, there was like some really clear impact. There was a lack of tokenization, and you could understand like that it's taking beyond. I think one of the challenges of design thinking right now is its practice is that it often ends up being like a paint by numbers thing and really rote, and it's like, hey, we did a design thinking process, and there's nothing in the world that changes or that is impacted by that. And I think that the idea of using awards to elevate like models for not just like they did design thinking well, but like actually where we want design thinking to go, and like fulfilling its promise, and actually impacting people's lives. I think that that's really critical.
This felt like people taking the idea of design thinking and actually applying it in a way and in a place where it could actually become something.
Yeah, I think that in general, the projects I gravitated to were the ones where it felt like it had a kind of immediate real world impact and was like actually shifting things. And I think with this one, what was interesting and what I think sometimes gets lost in design thinking projects is sometimes there's such focus at what happens at the end, that this one, it felt like the process of going through this actually was making changes right away, right? Like these teams who went through this program will never be the same, regardless of what happens with the program at the end. And so I really appreciated that. And I felt like it wasn't like design thinking being applied onto people, but like it was an actual co-design process.
Yeah. I also like the testimonials at the end. I thought that was a really nice touch. And a couple of them were actually quite revealing.
Yeah, I have to say, one of the things that really resonated with me just in their, how they are showing us this process, but what they sort of, what emerged from it is, and I know it seems like such a small thing, but teens being teens just feels really important.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like that is not, I think it's a thing that has to come from the conversation with the people in that space, to be like, we also just want a space to be us, right? To not have to be better all the time. I mean, that's just a tremendous insight to get to.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like when I saw that line, I was like, okay, they actually understand how to create with the living expert versus for them. And so like that, when I saw it, I was like, man, that's actually really good, because to your point, like there's always so much pressure on teens to figure out their life. What do you want to do? What are you in college for? What are you going to do after that? How you want to change the world? Are you going to change the world tomorrow? And then they're like, I don't know. Or they make up some stuff that may feel good right now that they know is going to change in a week, maybe, right? And so just the thought of like, I'm going to allow you to just be, and for you to know it's okay for you to be actually relieves a lot of stress and anxiety, especially for this group of people who, looking at that cohort, is like extremely diverse from ability, status, from race, from everything. And so like giving them that moment of being is actually super important for them.
The other thing at that age is, I think, so many kids are so dispirited, like no shop classes, this being told that everyone hates math, that STEM is boring, that a college degree is worthless. Like, I don't understand, like, you know, at that age, how you feel any kind of power agency. This is why I get upset when people are so cynical about design thinking. I think, well, if you've been in a design thinking workshop with people who have never done design, like, it's revelatory for them that there's actually a repeatable process that can, again, at least point to agency, if not give direct agency, at least lay out a systems map of how something is interconnected and all the different things that are not obviously in that system to see a system. And that it doesn't take a long time, and that it actually um, invites all of the participants as stakeholders themselves, invites them to bring who they are, where they are, when they are in any topic, and to have them participate in that way. Like, that's agency right there. And then actually seeing the potential of agency, of actually doing something that they feel is worthwhile doing, I think is huge. Especially when and again, maybe I'm a little cynical about the mood that a lot of young people are surrounded with in terms of what's the point of any of this. So it gave me hope. It was encouraging.
I also would add, like, I think what is perhaps not as explicitly said, but like embedded in just even what we were just talking about is like also the potential profound effect on the organization of which all of this is going through, right? Like the idea of giving agency and power to the teams actually starts to disrupt the power dynamics within the organization, and getting them to see that there is something that is rich that comes out of this hopefully means that with other things beyond this particular program, that the agency starts to look at residents and teens in particular as experts and comes to them when they're thinking of developing new programs or when they're even evaluating existing programs. So it's like the ripple effects of this are actually huge beyond just whatever the program is that emanates from this.
So important, actually, that Liz, the idea that this is not just tokenized, right? That it is not just a one-shot deal, but actually becomes part of the power system. Yeah, that actually should be the thing that we are centering in all of this work, right?
So I am by nature, I review things by skimming first, then going back for deeper understanding. And the fact that I could get the 3 points of what the purpose of this was without having to scroll too far, without having to dig deep, was within itself amazing, right? Like, just baseline.
I think I shortlisted it after 2 scrolls. Just like,
exactly.
Okay, shortlist.
It was like, right? Okay, I get it, cool. And then I go back through and read more deeply, and then I watch the video, and the video gives more context, and it was just a pile upon pile of like information that supported itself.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that. Just from this is a proposal, and we're trying to just learn more about it. And then when you dig deeply into just the information, I think that gets even more important, because like, I mean, I think anybody who's heard anything about India knows, especially like sexual health is a very hard topic, especially there. Sexual harassment, rape, like those things happen, especially like women are high danger for those things. And so them actually not just hitting on the, hey, this is reproductive health, but also on like, hey, this is what happened. Like, this is what, sexual assault is and things like that. Like they go through and talk about these different topics and try to normalize it. I think it's super interesting. And then the fourth goal around designing it at scale, trying to get it back out into the community.
Yeah, this is the key.
Is also super important.
Yeah, I've worked on a couple of different gender-based projects before, and I have to say one of the biggest things I think when those projects are done within the Global South is not layering in Western visions of how a project should be done and what is the goal that we should achieve, but actually understanding what the issues are within the cultural context and coming up with solutions that can be actually woven in and received within the cultural context. They have much more potential for actual adoption if you do it that way. And so this felt like it really took the time to figure out what those messages needed to be, what were the appropriate channels, who needed to be reached by it. And so I had more confidence in the potential success of this than other projects that were operating in contexts that I would say were far less complicated. And then the other thing that really stuck out to me is like, I think sometimes there's this presentation of design thinking being at odds with sort of scientific rigor and research, right? Like it's either you do one or the other. And what I really appreciated about this was that it was like combining the best of both of those worlds to actually create something that had the potential to scale and to be more impactful. And I thought it was just a beautifully elegant way in which to do it.
It seemed true to its vernacular as well. And at the end, before the video, we get to the graphic novel, which I know has been done before. It's just such a great idea in terms of the storytelling.
Yeah, this felt really complex and not complete is the word I want to use, but I don't mean that in a finite sense.
It's comprehensive. It's so many touch points.
So many. Yeah. And I actually really appreciated that they were really talking not just to young people, not just to young girls, but actually to young girls and boys, right? And so they were being very complete in who this educational model is for, but also about training the educators and to making very clear that they're really working across, the spectrum of users or stakeholders, whatever we want to call them here. And so I don't know, it just feels as though the model they've created has so much room to grow because so many people are brought into the process in so many ways. And there are so many different kinds of touch points for a person to say, I'm going to take this in new directions. So it feels like a kind of a process that can continue to grow and develop.
Yeah, the thoughtfulness of this project, I mean, it just was so impressive, and perhaps because I so rarely see projects that are this thoughtful, that it just kind of blew away a lot of the
and so human, which I think is the thing we were talking about earlier, of not being human, but how human this feels.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, honestly, if you just put these two, this project and the teen project, and kind of just said, this is the way we should be doing design thinking, right? Between the two of them, they just have all the elements that I feel like are where we try to get people to shoot for, but so rarely see people actually fulfilling.
To me, it's so comprehensive. It's almost this thing of like, you can almost question, like, are you covering too much? Do you have enough people, or like, is this like, because
the
you got
surface area, right?
Because like most, even like, you think of sex ed and stuff in high school, whatever, like usually it's a couple of weeks of PE class or whatever they go over, right? And this is like a comprehensive, like this could be easily a semester-long course within itself for kids. And so like, I guess looking at it from the flip side, like it's really great because also this thing, like you're talking about not only like the sexual health, sexual harassment, but also
it would have been really fascinating to see with a greater degree of specificity what their plan to scale was, because it might start to address some of these issues, right? Like, we know you're going to reach more classrooms, but are you reaching more classrooms with all of this? Or are you going to start with like some small part of it and scale up? But like, I mean, the project's so good that like, I love that we're knocking like, so tell me more about your scale, plan to scale, and how you're not going to get overwhelmed.
Yeah. Okay, so we will have to make a decision if that's the point that we're at.
I mean, I would personally, I would say my first second, right? I would say team-led program design first, and then KISSA second. And reason for that is, while I think that KISSA has a lot of amazing and broad impact, I think just the quotes, the story, the focus, just the humanness of team-led design, program design, just to me, that I connected to that one more deeply, and it felt very focused and like really impactful. And I think like the very minor half a point loss from KISSA to me is that it is so big and broad, and for me, that it seems like it's supposed to focus on sexual health, but it also has financial planning in there and a bunch of other things. And so it feels a little unfocused in that way, but that's like more of a nitpick than a like harsh criticism.
I will say, I think I would choose the teen project as my first, but on that point of like including that broader stuff, when I have done these like gender projects, one of the things that we have found is that we can't actually deal with gender-based issues without also dealing with all of this other stuff, just because it all comes into play in how we talk about a woman's ability to have a right to choose what happens to her body. So I'm not inclined to knock them for that, but I think part of the reason why I'm giving the teen project the edge is they really push this, whereas I feel like the other project kind of like, it did the research and it did it really well in a way that really engaged the voices of those who would be most impacted by the problem. I think it was still having a design team go out and do the project, whereas the teen project, I felt like they really brought the teens on as co-designers. And so in some ways, I feel like giving the award, we're not just giving it to the design firm that created it, we're actually giving it to the teens as well. And I feel like that's a super powerful thing. And so for me, that's what pushes them up to the top.
Yeah, I will definitely agree. I think the teen-led program design, insofar as it actually gives the young people who this is designed for and with the tools for becoming whatever it is that this enables them to become. And I think that ultimately what we can say the best thing design thinking can do is to stop being capital D, capital T design thinking, and actually be a way in which people are empowered to adapt their environments to be better for themselves and for their communities. Like that's, I think, what this program has is at least facilitating. So I think, you know, between the two projects, it's so narrow a margin. It's more like finding a reason for one of them to just not be, you know, the top one. But they're both, I think, really powerful. For all the reasons that have been expressed. And I think that, and Liz, to your point, and we learned this, you know, in fact, even in some of the thesis projects that we saw this year, this idea of dealing with the intersectionality of these issues around gender, right, and around poverty and sexual violence and self-actualization, you actually need to plug in so many different pieces in order for the one piece, right, the one thing to actually find any measure of change. But yeah, the teen-led program, I just think, has a little bit more of my personal heart.
A Kisakani project for me, just when I look at the topic, I want it to get as much attention as it can. So I have a pull to that topic, but you know, I concur with all of the comments about where the teen project has a little bit of an edge when we actually have to rank things like this in a program like this.
And beyond just this recording, are there like jury comments that go with each of these? Like, can we, you know, put that with the Kisa Kasahani that like, you know, we really believe in this project. And so like it was like one of the most impressive projects that I've seen in a while, but that it was just that this other project had something that in this particular moment in time put it a little bit above. Yeah, I thought that the question that they asked was super interesting about this idea of kind of decolonizing our future visions. And, you know, I'm super fascinated with some of this like futurism context, particularly like Afrofuturism. So I thought there were elements of there that were interesting. And I actually found like some of the products that emanated to be like super provocative and fascinating. What I thought was missing was like all the process stuff in between. Like that was not documented to any degree. I didn't really understand how design thinking fit into what they were doing. I more just like put it up there because I was like super fascinated to know more. But it's a hard one to talk about honoring just because it's like to the brief of talking about design thinking, there wasn't enough there. And I really tried. I went through their website and, you know, so I wanted to be like sort of say that there was something there. They just did a crappy job of putting up a commission.
Right.
But in truth, it's more, there are some ingredients that are interesting and provocative, but the design thinking piece is a bit light.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're also addressing what makes it really complex. And they say it here in their second third paragraph, which is the frame of one of the exercises is intentionally kept very loose, and I think it's because we're not really sure how to do this. This idea of decolonizing asks a lot. And again, I think that because they're talking about it in a futuring sense, you have to start from an historical. So so what is the process of getting through this? And I think it's probably still very much a work in progress, it seems. They're trying to figure it out as they go, which kudos.
For me, like, futurism with no purpose is art. And that's great, it's beautiful, but it's purposeless in the sense of like, I can't take this and understand how these people are using this as a mechanism to drive change or impact a purpose. And so in that sense is like, I was like, okay, it's nice.
No. I think it's a stance that lots of people have. I don't know, like, if you have a general aversion to speculative design fictions, or whether this one didn't move you in a way, to use your words, that art can actually move you into seeing things in a different way, to seeing possibilities in a different way, to seeing potential in a different way.
Yeah, like I use examples. So Alejandro Rosillo's champion or Chinapa ring is like, seeds are scarce and precious as jewels. These rings are used to preserve and mobilize them in the black market. Like, what? Like, I don't know what that means. Or there's one about like...
Well, you said it was like art, so they have to write like artists. So, mission accomplished. I should think that you should be giving extra points for that kind of, wall text writing. That's why we have a curator or a museum guard to tell us what we're looking at. My wife worked in museums and galleries for years. So she's got great stories about, the number of occasions that the guards in the room will be asked for either explication or like just an outright opinion. Like, do you think this is good?
I think there's a really good argument around speculative fictional design versus affirmative. I am a fan of speculative design work, and I think that it definitely can provoke really interesting conversations, and it can move culture forward, because I think that without futuring and speculating, we get too caught up in the now, and I think that it does require people to kind of push the imagination. And I've seen, I'm sure we could share lots of beautiful work along those lines. I think, again, like, the question of what does it mean as an educational model doesn't feel fully realized here. Right. So that what you're getting as a result is a hodgepodge instead of like a clear vision of what does it mean for futuring to kind of affirm, reclaim narratives, right? To set us off on entirely new narrative directions that actually do change what behavior actually becomes. So I think that's just like not articulated well here.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I selected this as opposed to some of the other speculative projects because I felt like, it felt like it sort of was in touch with reality and like some like core conditions in a way that some of the others were just still like so airy-fairy that I was like, give me a break. But I will say that it feels a little like to Jennifer's point, it feels like a little bit of the presentation that we got was maybe in the middle of the process as opposed to the end, right? Yeah. Like what would have really been helpful is like, all right, you've produced these beautiful jewels of objects that like some of them have like really provocative thinking around it. Mm-hmm. Then what do you do with that? Like if we had gotten the what do you do with that and how has it changed their thinking and where they're moving to and even a design project that they're working on, I think that would have helped it feel like it wasn't just in the realm of speculative imaginary without real life context or moving an issue forward. So it could be that like where the knock comes on this is that it didn't give us the presentation at the time it should have given us the presentation. It gave us like a midway through part of the conversation, and what we really needed to see was a little further along the way.
That's quite interesting from a perspective just in terms of, teaching design or tips and tricks on how to, enter an awards program. Like be really clear about the slice of time you are going to, package up.
I think the output itself would have been, like to your point, Liz, would have been fun had it connected to something to say, this is the purpose of it, this is where it's going to go. So that's a much better articulation of what I was saying. Like, judging the output themselves, like, it is what it is. And I think that's why it felt almost useless in a sense, was because I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't know how to connect this to something that makes sense.
I would be okay with mentioning Dreamt in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, again, you know, it's not, it doesn't win, but the framing, the intention of it, I think the fact of us catching it like a slice
Mm-hmm.
of something that maybe should be encouraged to
Mm-hmm.
develop further, maybe has some value.
I mean, if we do that, I'm also wondering if we give something to the Turkle project, since it seemed like we felt like that, I mean, it sort of pales in comparison to some of the others in terms of like the impact, but I do feel like that was like a rigorous project. I just don't feel, I don't feel super strongly about it, I think is the only thing. So it's just kind of like, do we give them an honorable for checking the box well?
It feels like each one may lack a bit of the other piece. And so like what Dreamt in Mexico is lacking, Turkhill has a bit of, and then what Turkhill is lacking, Dreamt in Mexico has a bit of. And so it's like, if you combine those two together,
dream team,
something that was like comprehensive, you actually have like a really nice project.
Remember that your project is competing against those two next year, though. So, yeah.
So yeah, like I think in that sense, they sort of balance each other out as like something to be mentioned.
Well, Natalie Jeremijenko, I don't know if she said this or quotes it, but this idea that you should focus blame narrowly and credit broadly. I'm all for giving mentions to projects that, you know, did a good job, even if they didn't do, you know, the best job. So it sounds like we have two mentions there. Can we all?
Definitely.
Yeah. And I wonder if maybe, you know, I'm a fan of jury comments. In the honorable mention, it seems like highlighting what about it we felt was worth giving an honorable mention, right? So it's not just that it's because we, in both of those, we kind of found some serious like flaws or things that very obviously did not bump it up to the top. So like the Dreamt in Mexico, it seems like the kind of question it started with and the provocativeness of that was something that we were really compelled by.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to like highlight that. Whereas the Turkle, it was like sort of the rigorousness with which they went through the program and the potential like sort of trails that it would have within the organization felt like what was notable about that. So just like kind of being really specific so that when people are looking at it, they're not just like, oh, the whole thing was great, but like that there were some very specific things that are worth looking at if you're looking at for models or references.
Has been programmed out over the last few years because so many jurors would not provide the comment.
Oh, Lord.
So we're bringing it back.
Of course.
So that means, Liz, you're going to have to comment on every project that happened in this year's entire awards. So, no, it's good. Okay.
As I said at the beginning, and this is being recorded now, so you can bleep it out, but like we're gonna give no fucks moment. So it's just like,
oh, God.
Call it as it is. It's like, nope. There's some projects that were very clearly on that.
Yeah.
Not for lack of effort that the person put into it, but I think is you know, where it needs to be honored in this way.
Like, for example, I think the Your Next You, I picked on that one earlier, but, you know, I think there's something interesting there. Is just that, like, the gap for me really boils down to the financial side of, like, the access. We want to provide access to a set of people to be able to enable them to have more movement in their career journeys. And that is a powerful vision. But the access is only limited by your financial ability right now, or your company's willingness to pay for it. And so, and those two things are very tough to find, especially from like small businesses and whatnot. And so like, I think that would be something where if they came back next year, haven't thought through that and really like crisp their program up some more, like it might actually be much higher up in the totem pole than where it is right now. And so, like being able to provide, even if we were to provide like even that kind of feedback, like, hey, this is how you can actually develop further, which is actually not even useful for like winning an award, but like just
Right.
considerations in developing your program, which is like this is a moment where you get outside feedback on it, like you don't in many other circles.
Oh shit! What was I going to say about that? I think I give them a benefit of the doubt. Right. So like this. I think that the intention here, which is actually to put some structure to a problem that is historically complex. How do you mechanize it? How do you actually do? I think the thing that Tim was saying, which is how do you create an ethical model that isn't already embedded with bias? Like, how do you get yourself out of your own way? It's really complicated. And so I'm not saying that I think that this should be put up in the winner circle at all. But in terms of where they're going, I think they're doing something beyond bland. I think they're actually trying at something, and I think they're creating this interesting kind of visual metaphor, this idea of this kind of stacking process.
Yeah,
that there are
attempt
these
to codify
layers.
Yeah,
and you disaggregate the layers in order to really home in on what is the thing right here that's going to have these repercussions down the line. So I think that there's something in the metaphor of it that I'm interested in. I just don't know how it works. Like I can't untangle the language from the object. So it's not making sense.
Well, it's interesting because you think of, and maybe this goes back to Tim's point about the bias, like actually negotiating ethics is such a deeply personal thing that then ultimately must plug back into the system. And what I'm struck by how they presented it is it felt devoid of the human piece, right? Like if you compare it to some of the ones in which we were like very gung-ho on, they brought the
people
full on into that, right? Like so you can understand as they're moving through the process. And this one, it seemed like almost like the thing that I sometimes fault technology solutions to, where it's like all about the technology and nothing about like actually that human beings at the end of the day have to be able to use it.
Right.
That's actually a really good observation, because that's exactly what they did. They leaned so heavily on the tech and talked about how great the tech is that they actually forgot about the people and the nuance behind it. Because like, let's be honest, the discussion about ethics is also a discussion about power. And so like, who has the power to say what is ethical or not? And then also it's culture based. So what is unethical to us is completely ethical to another culture.
Yeah.
And so like, I think that's like all of those misses are happening. So even in developing something to help like understand and help others understand ethics is also devoid of the ethics it is trying to convey. Mm-hmm. So it's like this, I guess, never ending cycle of ethical failure.
Yeah. Well, it's like trying to turn something objective that is actually highly subjective, right? Exactly. Like the way they presented it was very objective, and ethics is all about the fact that you can't lean into objectivity.
Yeah, I mean, I just find that really powerful, the idea that these juries are not just about awarding in a binary sense, but about really, and maybe that's partly to your point, Alan, about being really generous, but the generosity doesn't just come with a yay or nay. It actually comes with a thoughtful critique of the work. And the thoughtful critique, which Timothy just articulated, is like what's missing, and what does it mean to have the encouragement from somebody who believes in your idea to then to nudge it a little bit. Right. And I think that that's actually what the competitions can do the best, when they allow for those comments to filter back to the people.
Well, what a treat it was to have all of you here. Thank you so much. Especially, to honor, this commitment, today. Thank you so much for being able to still show up for this, and really difficult days, tough week ahead.
It's nice to laugh. It feels like that has not come through in the last couple of days, so I'm appreciating an opportunity to
Yes.
So to get a
That
little
we-
laughter into this morning. So thank you guys.
Agreed.